If you have eaten sushi outside of Japan, there is a very good chance you have never actually tasted wasabi, that bright green paste sitting next to your sushi. In most cases, it is not wasabi at all. It is an imitation, a mixture of horseradish, mustard, and green food coloring designed to look and feel like the real thing. And most people have no idea. They have eaten that green paste their entire lives, believing it was wasabi, when it was actually something completely different. Real wasabi is one of the rarest, most difficult, and most expensive ingredients in all of Japanese cuisine. And it tastes nothing like the green paste most people know. Today, we are decoding wasabi. What real wasabi actually is, why it is so rare, what is really in the fake version, and why fresh wasabi is one of the most surprising flavors you can experience. Let us start with the plant itself. Real wasabi comes from a plant called Wasabia japonica. It is a member of the Brassica family, which makes it a distant relative of horseradish, mustard, and cabbage. But it is not horseradish. The part you eat is the rhizome, which is the thick stem that grows at the base of the plant. And here is the first thing that makes wasabi so unusual. It is incredibly difficult to grow. Wasabi requires very specific conditions. It needs cool, flowing, clean water. It needs shade. It needs stable temperatures, usually between 8 and 20 degrees Celsius. It grows naturally along mountain stream beds in Japan. And it is extremely sensitive. Quick pause before we go deeper. If you're enjoying this so far, hit that thumbs up button below the video. It really helps me reach more food lovers like you. And if you're new here, subscribe to Food Decoded for weekly deep dives into what you're really eating. Wasabi takes a long time to grow. A single rhizome can take between 1 and 3 years to reach maturity. Compare that to most crops, which grow in a single season. Wasabi is slow, fragile, and demanding. It is prone to disease. It needs precise water management, and it cannot simply be mass-produced in a field like most vegetables. This is why real wasabi is so expensive. A single rhizome can cost a significant amount of money. Per kilogram, real wasabi is one of the most expensive vegetables in the world. And this is the core of the entire problem. Because there is enormous demand for wasabi, but there is a very limited supply of the real thing. So the market did what markets always do when demand exceeds supply. It found a substitute, and that substitute is what most people have been eating. So what is actually in the green paste? The typical wasabi paste served outside Japan, and even in many places inside Japan, is made from horseradish. Horseradish is much cheaper, much easier to grow, and produces a similar kind of heat. To that horseradish, manufacturers add mustard powder for extra punch and green food coloring to make it look like wasabi. Sometimes there is a tiny amount of real wasabi in the mix, just enough to put it on the label. But often there is none at all. You can usually tell by reading the ingredients. If horseradish is listed first, or if you see the words wasabi flavor, you are almost certainly eating the imitation. Real wasabi paste would simply list wasabi, and it would cost far more than the tube you find in most stores. This substitution is so widespread that most people genuinely believe the horseradish version is what wasabi is supposed to taste like. They have never had a reference point for the real thing. If what you just learned surprised you, do me a small favor. Drop a like on this video. It helps other curious eaters find this exact breakdown when they need it most. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect moment, because the most interesting part is coming up next. Now here is where it gets genuinely surprising. Real wasabi tastes completely different from the fake version. The imitation paste hits you hard and fast. It rushes up into your nose. It burns. It can bring tears to your eyes. And that intense sensation lingers. That aggressive, sinus-clearing heat, is actually a sign of horseradish, not wasabi. Real wasabi is much gentler. It still has heat, but the heat is softer, rounder, and more complex. There is a subtle sweetness underneath. There is an almost vegetal, fresh, green quality. And crucially, the heat fades very quickly. Real wasabi gives you a brief, clean burst of flavor and warmth, and then it is gone. It does not punch you and stay. It arrives, makes its point, and politely leaves. That difference is enormous. People who try real wasabi for the first time are often shocked at how mild and complex it is compared to what they expected. They expected an assault. What they get is balance. And this connects to how real wasabi is prepared. Real wasabi is never prepared in advance. The flavor compounds in wasabi are extremely volatile. They begin to break down within minutes of being grated. This is why real wasabi is grated fresh, right before serving. Traditionally, it is grated on a tool called an oroshigane. The best ones are made from dried shark skin. The fine texture of the shark skin breaks the cells of the rhizome in a very gentle way, releasing the flavor compounds without crushing them too aggressively. The wasabi is grated in a circular motion, slowly, to create a fine, almost creamy paste. And then it must be used quickly. Within about 15 minutes, much of the aroma and complexity will have faded. This is the opposite of the tube paste, which is shelf-stable for months. Real wasabi is alive. It is fleeting. It is meant to be experienced in a narrow window of freshness. That fragility is part of what makes it special. And it is also part of why the fake version took over. You cannot ship a flavor that disappears in 15 minutes around the world. You cannot stock it on supermarket shelves for months. The imitation exists because it is convenient, stable, and cheap. The real thing exists only where someone is willing to grow it, grate it fresh, and serve it immediately. But here is what most people miss. This is not really a story about fake versus real in a moral sense. It is a story about what happens when an ingredient is too difficult to scale. The horseradish version is not a scam exactly. It is a practical solution to an impossible supply problem. But it does mean that an entire generation of eaters has formed their idea of wasabi around a substitute. They think wasabi is the thing that burns your sinuses, when real wasabi is something far more subtle and interesting. This is a recurring theme in food. The version that scales is often not the version that is best. It is just the version that survives mass production. Real wasabi did not lose because it tasted worse. It lost because it could not be made cheap, stable, and shippable. And that brings us to the real question. The real question is not whether the green paste is fake. The real question is what we lose when we let convenience define our idea of an ingredient. Because most people will go their entire lives believing wasabi is an aggressive, sinus-burning paste, when the real thing is delicate, complex, fleeting, and quietly remarkable. If you ever get the chance to try freshly grated real wasabi, take it. Even a tiny amount on a piece of fish. You will immediately understand that you have been eating something else this whole time. And that experience changes how you think about every green paste you have ever had. So if you only take one thing from this video, let it be this. The wasabi most people know is usually horseradish, mustard, and food coloring. Real wasabi is a rare, slow-growing rhizome with a soft, complex, fleeting heat that tastes nothing like the imitation. And once you know the difference, you cannot unknow it. Have you ever tasted real, freshly grated wasabi? Tell me in the comments where you had it, and whether it was as different as people say. If this video helped you understand wasabi a little better, please leave a like. And if you haven't subscribed yet, join Food Decoded for more culinary clarity every week. If you want to keep uncovering what's really in your food, check out Soy Sauce Decoded on the left. We break down why most people buy the wrong bottle without knowing it. Or, if you want to understand another ingredient where simplicity hides deep craft, watch Tofu Decoded on the right. I'm Food Decoded. See you in the next one.